Good morning, everyone. It is 11 a.m. sharp. We are going to start our transmission today for our Sunday meeting at Conscious Living Spirits Group. I would like to welcome everyone. If someone would just post a quick comment so I can see if you can hear me and if you can see me well, that would be appreciated. We are going to, as usual, do just our initial reading so that we can prepare ourselves with our initial prayer, and then we will get to today's topic. Okay? It's perfect. Thank you, Carlos. I appreciate your feedback. So let's I just opened a page here from the book Living Spring, and it's lesson 141. Renew yourself always. Even though our outward man is wasting away, our inner man is being renewed day by day. Each day has a lesson for us. Each experience leaves behind its corresponding value. Each problem entails a determined objective. There are those who, tormented by counterproductive fears, express their rebelliousness when faced with infirmity, poverty, disillusionment, or old age. In the scene of the daily struggle, there is no lack of those who spectacularly flee their responsibilities, seeking in their discontinuance of the good fight and in their gradual agreement with death, peace which they cannot find. Remember that civilizations have come and gone for thousands of years, and that human beings, no matter how happy and powerful they might be, have had to lose their vehicle of flesh to settle their moral accounts with eternity. Even when the trial seems invincible, or when pain shows itself insuperable, do not withdraw yourself from the position of fighter in which divine providence has placed you. Remember that tomorrow the day will return to your arena of work. Stand firm in your area of service, teaching your mind to accept God's will. Sickness may only be a temporary and healthy summons handed down by heavenly justice. A scarcity of earthly resources is always an educational obstacle. A disappointment received with fervent courage is a work of the Lord's choosing on our behalf. The aging of the physical body is the solidification of wisdom for eternal happiness. Be optimist and diligent in the good amidst confidence and joy, for while the envelope of flesh gradually wastes away, the imperishable soul renews itself moment by moment for life everlasting. That is an amazing page. that it will fit perfectly with our talk today. I will repeat, that was lesson 141. Renew yourself always. Worth to be read again and to think about it. And especially in the times that we're living, it brings a tremendous amount of consolation, strength to all of us. So please join me on a short prayer as we close our eyes and raise our thoughts to God, asking our Father for strength and courage in times of trial, in times of challenges. We all have very natural human feelings of fear, of exhaustion, of anxiety. But we ask you to be with us, giving us the strength, helping us to connect with you, to find in your presence and your love the power and the courage that we need to press forward always with confidence and hope. Bless us during this hour. Please guide our thoughts and feelings as we deliver the message of today. And may this hour be an hour of nourishment to all our souls. Thank you for the blessings of this moment, and so be it. All right, so we are going to get started, and this is the title of our lecture for today. Good morning, Gisele. I miss you guys. Miss seeing our Sunday folks, but it's nice to see that you were there. So today we are going to talk about the Gospel by Emmanuel. And I just want to share with you that, hello, John, miss you. Just want to share with you that how I put this lecture together. What was the idea, right? So usually I like to think about a topic, and I was like, okay, it would be nice to talk about these times and something related to consolation, or perhaps how should we go about this time, understanding the meaning and also taking advantage of it to make the best out of such a difficult time. So what I did is I went to the work of Emmanuel, and particularly I pick a book, and in this case I pick The Way, the Truth, and the Life primarily. And I went through the entire book looking for different lessons and different chapters that could, I'm sorry, I forgot to change the image, different chapters and different lessons that could speak to that. So I wrote them down in a piece of paper, all of the ones that I found that I thought that would be beneficial. I put the titles and I put the gist of the message for each one of them. And then I just put them together, like literally like sewing something by pulling the pieces together. And this is the result of this work that I will be sharing with you today. And what I hope you can get from this is not only, how wonderful of an opportunity we have present in our lives today, but also an appreciation of the work of Emmanuel and of these books that we sometimes read so quickly at the center and in isolation, one lesson from another. But if studied and meditated, have, incredible teachings and really help us to understand the gospel from a much deeper perspective. I want to say hi to Priscilla and to Christina before we move forward to our next slide. So we're going to start actually, not with Emmanuel, but just going back to Genesis, the precursory signs that are found in the Gospel of Matthew. You shall hear talks of wars and rumors of war, but guard yourselves well against being troubled, for these things must occur. But these will not yet be the end, for you will see nations rise up against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be plagues, famine, earthquakes in many places, but all of these things will be only the beginning of things. So this is not what we are witnessing today, and what we are living today is definitely not something unexpected. In Genesis, we know that the time set by God has come, and many events are going to be happening for the regeneration of humanity. So we are in a process of change. We're in a process of evolution, of progress, and no one progresses without trials, without a push that can help us to become wiser, become more ethically evolved, and ready to ascend the spiritual ladder and go to the next step. So this is what we're witnessing at this time, is these times of change, these times of trial. Okay, so I would like to think that, we have been preparing ourselves for this moment. Many of us who are hearing us today, who have joined us, and who will listen to this lecture, maybe eventually, are people who have been going to the Spiritist Center, have been participating, studying groups, and things like that. So the idea is that, we would be preparing ourselves to moments like this. And that reminds me of Paul's letter to Timothy, his second letter, 4:21, when Paul says to Timothy, do your best to get here before the winter. And as any passage of the gospel, we can look at sentences with many different interpretations. But, one way of looking and understanding these sentences is that, it's best when we seek to strengthen ourselves in sunny days. So what happens in general is that, what do we do in sunny days, right? In sunny days, we get distracted because the days out there is so beautiful, it's so sunny. Who cares about the spirit? Let's enjoy the day. So the majority of humanity, and we included in that, a lot of times, when days are sunny, we are not really concerned with the things that are the most essential. But again, I would like to think that for us who have been in the spiritism for a while, we have been doing precisely what Paul said. We started the journey before the winter hit, before the crisis came down upon us. And therefore, we have been filling our tanks, and we have been gathering resources that can actually give us an advantageous situation now during this time of crisis. Many people are entering the crisis on the red. In other words, they have no reserves entering into this crisis. But let's believe that we have gathered some important resources that can help us through this time. And I think that the Gospel of Emmanuel, which means the way that Emmanuel's look at the gospel and unfolds the teaching of the gospel to all of us, it's a very, very special gift for any traveler, and that can really provide us with a lot of nourishment, so that in times of crisis, we don't experience a spiritual hunger. Okay, so let's get to the lessons of the book, and we're going to explore many of them. I hope you enjoy this method. The first one looks at this passage, then let those who are in Judea flee to the hills. It's in the Gospel of Matthew, and it is interpreted by Emmanuel in chapter 140. The title is To the Mountains. So what does this passage mean? How does Emmanuel look at it, right? So he's going to explain to us that this statement refers to the dolorous times that would mark the renewal of the planet. So it refers to today. So what is it that Christ is recommending that we do? So he explains to us that Judea, the term Judea, actually represents the spiritual region of all of those who, due to their inner aspirations, are closer to Jesus for enlightenment. So the ones who are in Judea are the ones who are already, they have the aspiration, they want to be close to Jesus. So they are in this region called Judea. And Jesus is recommending that they seek, that they flee to the hills. And the hills in the gospel is always going to represent the hill of superior ideas. So what Jesus is recommending is that, the crisis has come. We who are already seeking to be with the Master need to rise our thoughts, needs to elevate our thoughts to the higher regions, elevates our thoughts, broaden our vision, so that we can find in this position the resources and the strength to face the crisis. So this takes me to chapter 2 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. And in chapter 2, there's an item that's called the point of view. And I think that this is, it's an item that I like very much, because it explains what Spiritism does in a very simple way, right? So it actually uses the idea of a mountain too. So when we are on the valley, when we are on the ground, our perception of life is one. Once we climb the mountain, then it's a completely different perspective, because you're not seeing just that tiny little area that your vision can reach, but you start to see life from a much broader context. And so when ascending a mountain, individuals and things that seem so big becomes quite small, because you have a much broader perspective. And so I was like, okay, there are so many aspects of Spiritism that we can bring in that can help us to broaden our vision and deeper our understanding of what is happening. But I found one that I thought would fit particularly with our time, our topic right now, which, let me see, why is this thing not changing? There you go. Okay. Chapter 5, item 24, true misfortune. Okay. So what do we consider to be true misfortune, right? When we think about true misfortunes, what comes to mind? So generally in our life on earth, true misfortune is people who are poor or misery, or, if you have creditors knocking on your door, if you have lost a child, or for that matter, any type of death, situations of betrayal, situations of broken hearts, we tend to take those as true misfortunes. In this item, the spirit who delivers the message says that these are indeed true misfortunes when all we can see is the present moment. In other words, when we are down the valley, right? When we haven't climbed the mountain quite yet. And he's going to explain that true misfortunes are found more in the consequences of something than in the thing itself. So it's not the thing that is a misfortune, it's not the event, it's not the circumstance, but it is how we are dealing with that circumstance, how we are dealing with our own lives and the choices that we are making in a moment-to-moment basis. So he will remind us that many times we have many happy moments that end up bringing very disastrous consequences to ourselves. And he's going to bring this beautiful example when he says like this: tell me if the storm that snaps your trees but purifies the air, dissipating unhealthy miasmas that would cause death, is not a blessing rather than a misfortune. So again, I'm sorry. Again, it's the way that we look at things and the ability to appreciate things from a higher perspective. Of course, that we don't intend with this to minimize the hardships that so many people are going at this moment, but rather just help each one of us by remembering that there is a higher perspective for all the things that are happening that quite often we miss. We fail to see, not because we don't want to see, but sometimes it's hard, especially when we are overwhelmed with feelings and emotions, to be able to find some clarity in the midst of these situations. So what Spiritism does is, I have come to tell you that nearly everyone is mistaken, that true misfortune is not everything that people believe it to be. So again, giving a different perspective to us. So if we think about the way we have been living right up to this point, perhaps we can think of true misfortunes as the ways in which we have been disconnected from what is truly essential in life, the way we have been living our existence, the way in which we have placed our values in the wrong areas, in the wrong things. So the way in which we have placed the material reality above the spiritual reality, and think that this has perhaps been the true misfortune that we have dealt with as we in the ways in which we have been living. So Spiritism gives us this much broader, different understanding of life. And it also gives us, it teaches us that the consequences, the effects of our behaviors, they are part of a law, a divine law. There is a law of cause and effect. And it is always an opportunity for us to rethink and to reassess or assess the ways we have been living. And it is a way in which God finds to puts us back on the right path and redirect us in the right direction. And so for under the spiritual perspective, a crisis is always an opportunity for enlightenment, is always an opportunity for advancement. And if you are a Christian who is in Judea and who wishes to ascend spiritually, that means that crisis is the opportunity that you have been waiting for to testify the values that you have been nourishing in your soul. Let's think about this for a second, right? No one who is a highly evolved spirit became a highly evolved spirit simply by reading, meditating, going to the spirit centers, attending mediumistic meetings, or doing charity where we are giving out all the things that are already superfluous to us and no longer serve us. That's not how enlightenment takes place. Enlightenment takes place in the moments where challenges come in our lives and we are able not to move away, not to complain about the difficulties, but to embrace it and to testify, to bear witness to the values that we have been speaking, meditating, studying, and preparing ourselves precisely for those moments. So moving forward, we are going back to the way, the truth, and the life, right? And for this passage where Jesus is going to say, for if they do these things to the green tree, what will they do to the dry one? And this message is studied by Emmanuel in chapter 82 called Dry Trees. And here again, this chapter is about Jesus testifying and serving us an encouragement for us to go ahead and do the same. So Emmanuel is going to start by saying that he is the eternal vine, full of divine sap, and he did his part, right? He testified, he sacrificed, not because he needed, he did it out of love. However, we are like lifeless trees that human passions and illusions have uprooted. So we will see with Emmanuel that in fact we are green in essence. But every single time that we move away from the divine sap, we become undernourished, we become dry. And Emmanuel brings an image on this passage where he talks about country folk that makes punitive holes in the peach tree if their scrubby branches do not produce. And he says that the effect is very beneficial and very profitable. So he says that as dry trees who are undernourished because of our distance from the divine sap, right? We have to experience the effect of our actions, which brings to us still tremendous amount of suffering, not because God is wanting to punish us, but because God is love and has as a primary purpose the education of our souls. So again, we are looking at a time of spiritual promotion, and when we go to Living Spring, actually, I pulled two chapters, one from Living Spring and one from The Way, the Truth, and the Life. Both of them talk about bearing witness, which is what we are addressing here. Chapter 171 that you see there is called Bearing Witness. And then we're going to look at chapter 71, which is called Being a Witness. So in both chapters, Emmanuel is going to talk about this invitation for us to take advantage of this opportunity and invest in our spiritual promotion. So on the first one, to these you will call because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. So Emmanuel is going to comment that on chapter 171. And, he's going to pretty much repeat, to these we have been called by the example of the Master. Who denying himself left us the standard of the spiritual height that we should strive to achieve. So he came and he left an example. So again, and I say this and I repeat this because I feel that within myself, right? When I'm speaking about Spiritism, I speak with a lot of passion and a lot of it's something that moves me very deeply inside. When I read a romance, I cry, sometimes from beginning to end, right? So the message of Christ moves us, and this is wonderful. But it needs to do a little bit more than moving us. It needs to give us the strength to testify our fidelity, our loyalty to the Father, to actually be a testimony on how much those concepts are ingrained in our souls and in our making, to the point that we are truly, truly open and ready to take the narrow door and to address life and to address challenges from the paradigm of immortality and embracing the principles that the gospel teaches. So this is very difficult because there is a gap between the way in which the message moves us and our ability to actually testify, to bear witness, right? So in the next chapter, which is chapter 71, here Emmanuel is going to interpret this passage, and this will happen to you so that you may be a witness. So of course we are, in this moment we are dealing with a collective trial. All of us are being affected by this crisis, but each one of us is experiencing it slightly different. For some of us, it's a major, major trial with a lot of losses, material losses, and many concerns, and many difficulties, and many obstacles because of the difficulty with services. If you already were in a home, in a system that was frail, then this becomes very complicated. Some of us have more financial resources, emotional resources, spiritual resources, and then things are difficult, but not as difficult. So, but the point is that you know, if the master has called you, it's basically because he considers that you are worthy of being a witness, that you have the resources, and whatever resources you don't have, they will be granted to you if you open yourself to faith and to Jesus' presence, right? So where do we gather the strength to bear witness in times of turmoil like this? From the idea that we are in this planet. We are incarnated, right? We are in the density of within the density of matter, precisely to dematerialize ourselves, precisely to learn what Paul says to Hebrews in one of his letters. He says, no matter what, the world will perish. No matter what, our bodies will wear out eventually, but we will remain. So we're going to gather strength through this by tapping into the message of immortality, by remembering that even if we win, which we will win over this virus, right? Everything that is material is moving towards an end. This all will end one day. Our lives will end, our physical lives will end, whether it's because of the coronavirus, because it had to be this way, or for any other reason, because our body is material, but we are imperishable. So when we can and when we are able to be more centered around those values, right, we become more courageous and we become also more appreciative of what life is giving us at any time. And so each crisis is going to come, and it's an invitation for us to bear witness. Is also, as we have said, an opportunity for us to unchain ourselves from illusions, to review values. It is an opportunity for us to release some of the mistakes that we have done in this life or in past lives. And it's an opportunity for us to shed some light into the original darkness, which is always the darkness within that has generated this apparent chaos that we see out there. It's an opportunity for us to gain some consciousness, to gain some awareness. I did a show, this one of those live talks this week with two young adults in Brazil, both of them in their 20s. It was a remarkable and truly, truly enjoyable experience to hear two 20 years old speaking about this crisis and spiritism. And I'm going to tell you, it definitely gives me some hope. But one of the girls that was in the show with us, she was referring back to a recent experience in Brazil where they had to really control the use of water, because water, which is an essential thing in life, there was just wasn't enough water for everybody. And so she was speaking about how after the crisis was over, people became more conscious about the use of water and about the need not to waste so much water. So crises, they come and they help us to speed up in the process of awakening and also consciousness. So this brings me to another passage that I really, really enjoy learning and reading. Um, so it's found in the Gospel of John, and the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped in strips, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." So this is a study by Emmanuel in chapter 112. The title is Like Lazarus. And in this particular chapter, Emmanuel tells us that, when Lazarus was resurrected, right, he was not only given a chance to continue to be incarnated, but he was given a chance to restart his human experience with different values. So it talks about the value of life, but it also talks about the value of crisis. As we go through this crisis, we can only hope that the crisis is helping us to unwrap from ourselves the clots of illusion and to unchain ourselves from some of our past errors so that we can move forward more alive than ever, because more nourished and more in touch with what is essential than ever are well. So we can move from an outward place of scarcity, and from this material scarcity, we can draw inwards abundance and life. But to bear witness does not mean that, although all those things give us strength and are very consoling, it's also important that, it's not expected from us. There will be tough heroes 100% of the time, and also they will not have feelings, feelings of exhaustion, feelings of doubt, feelings of fear, feelings of anxiety, whatever feelings might be, feelings of sadness. And so I really like this chapter 172. The title is Tears. And it's an important chapter because here Emmanuel is going to remind us that tears are not a sign of spiritual weakness. Mary wept at the Calvary. Peter shed tears after his denial. Paul burst in tears at the doors of Damascus, and the first Christians wept in the circus of martyrdom. So we can see that pain and tears and fear and whatever that might be, it's okay. It's going to be there. And it's not that that's going to determine whether you are winning or not these not the virus, but if you were successfully or not overcoming the obstacles and growing spiritually. You can achieve that even with all these feelings and even with a whole bunch of tears. What Emmanuel says is that none of these tears that were shed in the examples above were shed without hope. And here we should stop and think for a little bit. So it's not a matter of crying or not. It's not a matter of like having feelings, but what we cannot lose sight is of hope. None of them cry without hope. And he continues by saying, they wept and followed the path of the Lord. They endured and proclaimed the good news of redemption, and they suffered and died faithfully in supreme trust. And he complements by saying that the weariness experienced out of love for Christ becomes strength. And I am going to tell you on a personal level, I have had many days. It's been a roller coaster, up and down, days where I feel much stronger, days where I feel completely beat. My son another day said, Mommy, you were so grouchy at the end of each day. You look dead. You have no energy for anything. Because the days have been pretty exhaustive days, and he wants to play ping pong with me at the end of the day. And some days I am just plain exhausted. And some days I'm actually sad. I'm sad with everything that's happening. I am sad with the state of things. I am sad to see. I have a patient, a very demented individual whose family came every day and brought breakfast and lunch and dinner to her, and a very particular food that she likes. And since then, because nobody can enter the nursing home right now other than staff, she has no option but to eat the food from the nursing home, and she stopped eating altogether. Altogether. This is someone who is 100% demented. And so, we're now trying to figure out what we can do as an institution to address this issue. But that makes me sad, it makes me sad, and a lot of things will make us sad. But we cannot lose hope, as we see in the wedding of Cana, right? Emmanuel also uses this image, a very beautiful image. He says, there was a point on the wedding where the wine of hope was no longer available. And what did the servants do? They seek Mary for advice. And what does Mary say when there's no more of the wine of hope? She says, do whatever he tells you. He redirects them to the one who could definitely help them. And that was Jesus, because she recognized in her son his position, his power, and his love. And so in times of this, let's make sure that we remember that Christ is not someone who is far away. As Emmanuel says, he's not a spirit who dwells in a sphere that is inaccessible to our thoughts. In fact, Emmanuel says, before we become aware of the problems that afflicts us, he knows about it and suffers because he knows of our errors and the ways that we have been conducting ourselves. So we should seek him for company and for strength. And he said, I am the truth. I am the true vine, and my father is the vine dresser. Is in the Gospel of John. And Emmanuel is going to comment that on chapter 54. And the title is The Vine. And here he's going to talk about Jesus' roles in our lives. He's going to tell us about how tiny and obscure our planet still is. And in this position, it speaks about our inability to really, really understand and grasp the idea of God. And Emmanuel says, nevertheless, in order to sense his presence without limited comprehension, God gave us Jesus as his ultimate personification. So it's helpful if we turn to him. It's helpful if we remember that we are in this planet, which is an immense school for the education of our souls. It helps if we remember that humbly that we are still very much in the infancy of our spiritual process, and we are in need of illumination, of enlightenment. And always, it's important for us to remember that if we are away from the divine sap, we will wither, we will be hungry, we will stagnate in darkness and hopelessness. He says, I am the vine and you are the branches. So his love and his gospel and his message of immortality is really what sustains us. We are, in essence, as I have said, green branches of a very glorious tree. But when we fail in our duties, when we commit mistakes, when we violate the laws of love, which we have been doing individually and collectively, then we dry out and we fall to the ground. And that's when suffering hits our lives. And that's also when the Master comes and picks us up in his incredible mercy. So Emmanuel has a sentence that's really, really beautiful. And we are going to start wrapping up here, okay? So he says, let us prove our faithfulness to the Divine Master, reflecting on the many times that we have dried up in the past, in spite of the immense love that sustains us through. I'm going to read this again. Let us prove our faithfulness to the Divine Master, reflecting on the many times that we have dried up in the past, in spite of the immense love that sustains us through. So it's time, my dear friends, to get it right. We have missed some very incredible opportunities in the past to do the work that we need to do, to testify, to have enough courage and enough strength to do our part and to get it right and to take ourselves to another realm. We can do differently and we can do better. We have left before the winter. We have been walking. We have been gathering the resources needed. We have it, what it takes to endure this winter together. And we can be very much like Lazarus was. And this is another chapter. I'm not going to read that, but the reference is there for you. We can be very much like Lazarus that was touched by Jesus' message. And in this passage in John, Jesus will says, for on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. And it means that Lazarus became a point of reference to others. Many people have heard the message of Jesus, but they don't truly understand. They don't capture the depths of the message. And we who have been touched by the message, as we are capable of testify, of bear witness, as we're able to live the message, we become points of reference that people will look for and look at, and hopefully they will finally come to an understanding of what the message is truly about, not because they heard theoretically, because they are witnessing what the message has done to our lives and to the way we live our lives. And they will many times in a perplexed way ask us, who are you? Where do you come from? How can you find this sort of strength? And how can you act in these ways? Where does your strength come from? And so we become what Emmanuel and Jesus says, as Emmanuel is going to comment, we become the salt of the earth. So Emmanuel says Christians are not ornamental flowers in isolated churches or temples. They are the salt of the earth, the power of the preservation of the divine principles in the sanctuary of the whole world. So I'm going to invite you to take a really high step here and take a really high step here and not only find in the message the courage to to be different in the world, but to be the a reference. Even with the limitations that we have, we can be the best references possible, which is not a reference of perfection, but it's a reference of the impact that the message has already on our lives. In a world where there is so much despair, I have some, we talk about I apologize. We talk about the most frail of all. I have psychiatric patients who are in assisted living facilities that, with the entire limitation of like going out and not being able to do what they regularly do, they start jumping walls, they start eloping. So these are the levels of despair, and there are a lot of things that the media doesn't even cover to speak about the levels of desperation and how this is impacting our society. So it is imperative, it is important, it is okay that we have days where we are not that strong, but it's important that we don't lose hope, and that on our good and strong days we testify to what we have been talking about, and we become the salt of the earth, preserving and disseminating these very principles that mean everything to us. And my last slide here is from this sentence where Jesus says, "I'm not alone, for my Father is with me," in the Gospel of John, and commented by Emmanuel on chapter 170, Spiritual Control. It's a magnificent page. I'm telling you, magnificent. Okay. So in this page, Emmanuel is going to, talk about what true control is, right? So we one of the worst feelings we can possibly have is a feeling of not only hopelessness, but not having powerlessness, right? Not being able to control the situation. So it's worth reading the entire chapter. I have the book right here with me. I'm not going to read it entirely, but right here, he's going to talk about, the moment in which Jesus is being taken to the cross. And he's going to say that, on times of crisis, we can analyze how the exterior forces of life, how much weight they have on us, right? Our attachment to material things, our attachment to people, to affections, many different things. So times of crisis speak, as he says, how the external forces control our souls. So whatever is the nature of our suffering speaks somewhat to where we are in life, and some of our areas that need a little bit of work. But he's going to say, that the tender love that he had for his disciples did not control his heart on that time. In other words, it was time to testify, it was time to go. And although he loved his disciples, that affection did not take control over his heart to the point that he gave up in doing what he needed to do. The tears of the women of Jerusalem did not weaken his heart. In other words, he saw the people who were crying for him. He actually witnessed the suffering. He knew those women were going to be, we were going to feel like, somewhat abandoned for a period of time, or perhaps orphaned of his love. And yet, even in witnessing that suffering and those women that I'm sure he loved very deeply, right? It did not stop him from doing what he needed to do. The sarcasm of the crowd did not break his silence. The cross did not change his serenity. In fact, from the top of the cross, he still asked God to forgive humanity. So his lesson of spiritual self-control is profound and imperishable. It reveals the need for us to be ourselves. In other words, loyal to our principles, facing the most difficult moments of our life with a peaceful conscience, focused on the divine justice, and a faithful heart guided by the divine will. So I truly hope that this message can be one that will sustain us. I hope that you can appreciate how much we can learn uh, about the gospel with the devoted work of this spirit who has been studying the gospel in the spiritual realm in order to um, bring us these lessons of immortality. So don't be harsh on yourselves. This is a very difficult time. Embrace your humanity. Shed the tears that you need to shed whenever you feel like it. But the most important thing that I would like to say is remember you're not alone, and don't ever lose hope, because everything will perish one day, but we will remain. So God bless you all. Thank you for your participation. Priscilla, big kiss for you. Raquel, thank you. Regina, thank you for being here. Alegria, good morning. Thank you for the compliment of my hair. I just like to see the comments and acknowledge the people. It's very important, your participation. We'd like to encourage people to participate, put their comments. If we have time, we can always reply to any questions if we have time. I don't have a problem with that. Vivi, good to see you. And with that, my dear friends, I would ask you to stay with us for 2 more minutes as we are going to finalize our meeting with the prayer. I would like to remind you that although we are physically close, we continue to pay for the expenses of our physical space. I completely understand that many of us are going through a time of incredible hardship. And if that is your case, by all means, you don't have to feel pressure or obliged to anything. But not all of us are out of jobs or are in a difficult financial situation necessarily. So if you are one of these, please don't forget to help our spiritual home. There are many ways in which you can help. Unfortunately, by not being physically present, we cannot sell you pastéis and food and different things to help us to raise the money. But you can always contact me. You can always contact one of the workers. We have ways of making a contribution online on our website. So please do so. We really appreciate all your contributions. We appreciate your participation on our program. It keeps the spirit of the center alive, and we appreciate that very much. Love you all. I miss you all. Let's ask God at this moment for its blessing all of us as we prepare to start a new week, to give us the strength to help us to remain connected to everything that we have learned that is essential. Help us to be the salt of the earth, the light of the world, wherever we are. And in the moments that we fail to be, forgive us our weakness and give us the strength to stand up once more and press forward always. Bless all the people who are suffering. So many people out there, so many people suffering, so many people in despair. May our thoughts of this time be towards all of the ones who are in need of hope, asking our Lord Jesus and God our Father to be with them, giving them the strength and often the resources that we are unable to give. Thank you so much for the blessings of this day, and so be it. All right, dear friends, take care. Have a wonderful day. I will see you next week. Still have a minute here on Agosto, big Hug to you. It's nice to see you online. We work on the same place and never see each other, but it's nice to know you're here. Adriana, thank you. Thank you for your presence and your incentive. Have a great day, everyone. See you soon.